For decades, the sudden death of Jeff Chandler has remained one of Hollywood's most perplexing and haunting mysteries. A rising star of the 1950s, Chandler was admired for his charm, talent, and commanding presence on screen. He had everything a leading man could dream of: fame, fortune, and admiration, but behind the glitz and glamour, there were questions that no one could answer. Questions that would linger long after his shocking demise. Chandler's death was sudden, unexpected, and deeply troubling. Official reports painted it as a tragic accident, a sudden health complication that ended a promising life far too early. Yet those close to him sensed something darker, something that didn't add up. Friends whispered of unusual circumstances, industry insiders hinted at hidden pressures, and rumors of undisclosed conflicts circulated quietly in Hollywood circles. Even the timeline of events that night has been clouded with inconsistencies. Who was truly with Chandler in his final hours? What unseen factors contributed to his untimely death? And why have so many questions remained unanswered for so many years? Now, decades later, investigators and experts have re-examined evidence, uncovered new testimonies, and brought forward information that was once overlooked or deliberately hidden. The truth that has emerged is far more disturbing than anyone imagined. It doesn't just challenge the official story, it shatters the illusions Hollywood built around the star. This is a story of fame, secrecy, and tragedy. It is a story the public thought they knew, but they were wrong. And the truth about Jeff Chandler's final hours isn't just shocking. It isn't good. Jeff Chandler's rise to fame was meteoric. Born in the 1920s, he grew up far from the Hollywood spotlight. Yet his talent, ambition, and charisma propelled him to the forefront of the film industry. By the 1950s, he was one of the most recognizable leading men on screen, praised for his deep voice, commanding presence, and ability to portray both vulnerability and strength. Audiences adored him, critics lauded him, and studios treated him like a golden asset. But behind the polished image of success, there were cracks, subtle, almost invisible to the public eye, but undeniable to those who knew him well. Friends and colleagues often described Chandler as polite, professional, and intensely private. He had a reputation for being courteous on set, for always showing up prepared, and for maintaining a sense of dignity rarely seen in Hollywood. Yet his personal life was more complicated. Long hours, demanding schedules, and the constant pressure to perform left him with little time to manage personal relationships. Those who were close to him later admitted that beneath the charm and professionalism, he carried stress, occasional frustration, and a sense of isolation. Chandler's career achievements were remarkable. He earned Academy Award nominations, headlined major films, and became the embodiment of the perfect Hollywood leading man. But fame brought its own pressures. He faced public scrutiny over his appearances, his choices, and even his personal associations. Fans and reporters watched his every move, often turning small incidents into headlines. While Chandler handled most of it with grace, the weight of expectation was constant and unrelenting. In the weeks leading up to his death, he had been involved in multiple projects simultaneously. Long days on set were followed by studio meetings, publicity events, and social obligations. He was known to push himself hard, rarely taking time to rest or recharge. Friends noticed he seemed more fatigued than usual, and that the spark in his eyes occasionally flickered under the strain. Some claimed he had been unusually reflective, almost distant, hinting that he was preoccupied with thoughts he didn't share with anyone. Then there were the rumors that quietly swirled around him. Hollywood gossip has always thrived on speculation, but some of the whispers about Chandler went beyond idle chatter. Insiders hinted at conflicts with producers, creative disagreements, and personal struggles he rarely discussed publicly. While these rumors were never confirmed, they painted a picture of a man balancing professional success with private turmoil. The night of his death remains one of the most puzzling elements of the story. Chandler had been working on a demanding schedule and planned to unwind with friends afterward. Witnesses later recalled him being in high spirits at first, yet tension appeared to rise as the evening progressed. He was reportedly polite and charming as always, but subtle signs suggested he might have been physically or emotionally exhausted. By the early hours, tragedy struck. Details about the final moments are murky, inconsistent, and often contradictory. Some witnesses offered one version, while others told something entirely different. Official reports suggested a sudden health complication as the cause of death, yet those closest to him quietly admitted that explanation never felt complete. Something about the circumstances didn't sit right with anyone who truly knew Jeff Chandler. In the days and months following his passing, the public mourned, the media speculated, and Hollywood tried to move on. Yet decades later, the story remained unresolved. Inconsistencies, missing details, and previously unheard testimonies continued to cast shadows over the official narrative. And now, with new evidence emerging, the truth about Jeff Chandler's final hours is finally being revealed. And it is far more troubling than anyone imagined. In the days following Jeff Chandler's unexpected death, confusion quickly spread. Friends, colleagues, and fans struggled to reconcile the sudden loss of a man who had seemed strong, confident, and in control of his life. Initial reports suggested that Chandler had suffered a sudden health complication, a tragic yet natural end to a rising star's life. But for those who had known him closely, the official explanation didn't make sense. They remembered a man who was vigilant about his health, someone who had taken precautions and lived carefully despite the high-pressure world of Hollywood. The first inconsistencies appeared in witness statements. Those who had been with Chandler in his final hours offered slightly different accounts of what happened, ranging from timelines to the details of conversations. While no one disputed that he had spent time with friends that evening, the sequence of events varied depending on whom investigators questioned. Some remembered him laughing and engaged. Others recalled a more withdrawn, contemplative side that few had seen before. These discrepancies made it difficult to determine exactly what had occurred, leaving investigators to piece together fragments of memory from multiple perspectives. One particularly troubling factor involved the environment where Chandler had spent his last moments. The location, while familiar to him, contained potential hazards that could have played a role in his death. Friends later admitted that Chandler had occasionally expressed frustration with minor accidents or mishaps during his time there. Though these details seemed small at the time, they became significant when re-examined with the knowledge of what ultimately occurred. Another point of concern was Chandler's physical condition. While officially he was considered healthy, some who had interacted with him closely noted subtle signs of fatigue, slight bruises, or moments of discomfort that had previously been overlooked. None of these alone explained his death, but collectively they painted a picture of a man who may have been under more strain than anyone realized. As the investigation continued, new witnesses slowly came forward, revealing details that had been withheld or forgotten over the years. One friend described Chandler as unusually tense the night of his passing, almost as if he were anticipating a problem he couldn't avoid. Another mentioned overhearing a conversation that hinted at disagreements or conflicts, though the specifics remained unclear. These testimonies added complexity to an already puzzling situation, suggesting that Chandler's final hours involved more than just casual social interaction. Perhaps the most confounding element was the timing of events. The hours leading up to Chandler's death were filled with contradictions. Reports conflicted about when he had last been seen alive, when he had spoken to those around him, and even when emergency services were contacted. Each inconsistency, while minor on its own, contributed to an overall sense that the tragedy wasn't fully understood. Even Hollywood insiders, who had long speculated about Chandler's death, acknowledged that the official story left too many questions unanswered. Over the decades, theories ranged from hidden health issues to potential accidents, but nothing had ever fully accounted for the evidence. Those closest to him were haunted by the gaps in understanding, while fans continued to mourn the loss of someone whose life and career had been cut short far too soon. The renewed investigation, with modern technology and fresh testimonies, began to challenge the long-accepted narrative. Inconsistencies that were once ignored were now being scrutinized. Details once considered trivial suddenly gained new weight. And slowly, a far more troubling picture began to emerge, one that suggested Chandler's final moments were far from simple or natural. What investigators discovered next would shock Hollywood, change the story forever, and reveal the unsettling truth behind the sudden death of a man whose life had been defined by talent, ambition, and the pressures of fame. As new evidence surfaced decades later, it became clear that Jeff Chandler's death was far more complex than the initial reports suggested. Investigators began piecing together statements, revisiting timelines, and evaluating witness accounts that had never been given full attention. What emerged painted a troubling portrait: a man under unseen pressures, surrounded by circumstances that may have contributed to the tragedy in ways nobody expected. Those closest to Chandler recalled subtle warning signs in the days before his death. Friends said he seemed more contemplative, quieter than usual, almost preoccupied. He joked less, laughed less, and carried a tension that had previously been invisible to the casual observer. For someone known for his confidence and poise, these changes were noticeable to those who knew him best. Yet Chandler never expressed fear or concern out loud, keeping his private struggles largely hidden from the world. Witnesses who had been with him on the night in question described a mix of emotions. Some noticed excitement and energy, while others detected anxiety and unease. These conflicting observations made it difficult to determine his exact state of mind, leaving investigators to interpret subtle clues. Even minor details, such as changes in his movements, gestures, or tone, became critical when trying to understand what transpired. Forensic evidence was also revisited. Medical experts, armed with modern techniques unavailable in the early 1960s, re-examined reports and photographs. While the findings did not suggest foul play in a traditional sense, they did indicate that Chandler may have experienced sudden physical stress or an unexpected accident. Injuries that were once dismissed as minor or incidental gained new significance. They hinted at a struggle, a sudden imbalance, or a scenario in which a small misstep could have catastrophic consequences. Additionally, investigators analyzed environmental factors that had long been overlooked. The area where Chandler spent his final hours had subtle hazards, uneven surfaces, limited visibility, and conditions that could easily result in a fall or mishap, especially if someone was distracted or exhausted. Combined with fatigue, stress, or emotional tension, these elements created a situation in which a single moment could turn deadly. Perhaps most unsettling were the inconsistencies in witness recollections. Over time, stories shifted. Some accounts minimized conflicts or suggested Chandler was in high spirits, while others described tension and disagreement. These variations raised critical questions. What had he truly been experiencing in his final hours? What interactions had occurred that no one documented at the time? And could these details have prevented the tragedy if they had been recognized earlier? Even Hollywood insiders, who had long speculated about Chandler's death, began acknowledging that the mystery was more than just an accident. Years of gossip, rumors, and speculation obscured the reality, but modern investigation brought clarity. The circumstances surrounding his passing were layered, complex, and influenced by more than one simple factor. Ultimately, the renewed scrutiny revealed a sobering truth. Chandler's death wasn't merely a sudden event. It was the result of a perfect storm: hidden tension, subtle physical risk, environmental hazards, and perhaps overlooked warning signs that went unheeded. The tragedy that had once seemed abrupt now appeared as a sequence of converging factors, each contributing to the heartbreaking outcome for fans, friends, and family. This realization brought both relief and sorrow. Relief, because the mystery had finally been examined with the seriousness it deserved. Sorrow, because the truth was far more troubling than anyone had imagined. Jeff Chandler's passing had been inevitable in a sense, but the full story, his struggles, his final moments, and the hidden dangers he faced, was finally being brought to light. As the investigation reached its conclusion, the emerging picture of Jeff Chandler's final hours was both heartbreaking and unsettling. The combination of unseen stress, physical risk, and environmental hazards had created a perfect storm. The man who had captivated audiences with charm and strength had been vulnerable in ways few had realized. Hollywood had mourned his death for decades, but the full story now revealed a complexity that had been hidden behind decades of assumption, speculation, and incomplete reporting. One of the most striking revelations came from new witnesses who had stayed silent for years. They described moments of tension, conversations charged with emotion, and instances of subtle distress that had gone unnoticed at the time. While none pointed directly to foul play, these accounts highlighted the fragile state of Chandler's final hours. Investigators concluded that he may have been attempting to manage multiple pressures simultaneously: social, professional, and personal, all while navigating a physical environment that held unexpected risks. Forensic experts also provided critical insight. Modern analysis suggested that Chandler's injuries, previously considered minor or incidental, aligned with an accident exacerbated by stress or imbalance. In other words, a simple misstep, unnoticed fatigue, or momentary distraction could have led to the fatal outcome. These findings didn't assign blame, but they offered a clearer understanding of the chain of events, filling in gaps that had haunted the case for decades. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the investigation was how preventable parts of the tragedy might have been. Had certain warning signs been recognized, whether physical fatigue, emotional tension, or environmental hazards, the outcome could have been different. Friends and colleagues expressed sorrow over missed opportunities to intervene, realizing that even the smallest actions might have altered history. The combination of circumstance, environment, and human vulnerability had produced a result that no one intended, yet it left an indelible mark on everyone involved. The renewed examination also shed light on the personal toll this mystery had taken over the years. Families, friends, and fellow actors lived with uncertainty, guilt, and unanswered questions for decades. Every retelling, every speculation only deepened the emotional burden. Even Hollywood itself, which often moves quickly past tragedies, could not escape the lasting impact of Chandler's untimely passing. Ultimately, the truth about Jeff Chandler's death does not provide comfort in the traditional sense. There is no tidy conclusion, no single explanation, and no one to hold accountable in the way the public might have hoped. What it does offer is clarity, a chance to understand, to reconcile, and to acknowledge the combination of human frailty and circumstance that led to a life being cut tragically short. Jeff Chandler's story is a sobering reminder that even those who appear strongest, most confident, or most in control, can face moments of vulnerability that are unseen by the world. Fame, talent, and success do not shield anyone from unforeseen risks or the quiet, invisible pressures that life can bring. His legacy lives on through his work, his impact on the entertainment industry, in the renewed understanding of the circumstances surrounding his death. A mystery finally brought into the light, and a tragedy that will never be forgotten.